Latasha wiped her hands on her apron and carried a tray of drinks to table 7. It was another long evening shift at Bella's Bistro, a fancy place downtown where rich folks came to eat overpriced food and act important. She had been working there for 6 months now, trying to save enough to go back to school. Her dream was to study music, but dreams didn't pay rent. She moved quickly between tables, smiling at customers, pretending their rude comments didn't bother her. Most of the people barely noticed her. To them, she was just another waitress. But tonight, one customer was different. He walked in wearing a dark blue suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His shoes shined like mirrors. He had that look, like he owned the room. He didn't wait to be seated. He chose the best table near the window and snapped his fingers for service. His name was Bradley Warren. She knew the type. Old money, loud voice, and too much confidence. Latasha took his order. He asked for steak, rare, and a bottle of expensive wine. He didn't say please. As she wrote it down, he looked her up and down like she was part of the furniture. "What's your name?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Latasha," she said. He nodded slowly. "You seem too quiet to be a waitress. Ever do anything else?" She forced a smile. "I play piano. Or I used to." His eyes lit up like he had found something amusing. "Piano? Really? You don't look like a pianist." She didn't respond. She'd heard worse. Besides, the piano in the corner of the restaurant was more decoration than instrument. It hadn't been played in months, maybe years. Bradley followed her gaze to the piano and grinned. "I'll tell you what. After my dinner, why don't you play me something? Let's see if you're any good." Latasha laughed a little, thinking he was joking. But he wasn't. He looked straight at her. "I'm serious. Play something. Just one song. I'll tip you $100 if it's not awful." Her stomach tightened. He wasn't asking to be kind. He was trying to embarrass her. Maybe he thought it would be funny. She wasn't sure if he thought she'd say no or if he just wanted a story to tell his rich friends. Either way, she didn't answer. She turned and walked back to the kitchen, trying to shake off the feeling. But the piano stayed in the back of her mind, like a small whisper calling her out. Tonight was going to be different. And deep down, she already knew she was going to play. Latasha stood in the kitchen, the heat of the oven and the clatter of dishes making everything feel chaotic. She tried to focus on her tasks, serving drinks, cleaning tables, taking orders, but her mind kept drifting back to the piano. Bradley's challenge echoed in her head like a drumbeat. $100 if she played. He didn't think she could, didn't believe she could, and maybe that's why it bothered her so much. She knew she had no choice but to play. It wasn't about the money, though that would be nice. It was about proving him wrong, showing him that he didn't know her, didn't understand anything about her or what she was capable of. She had worked so hard for this moment. Music was everything to her. It was the only thing that made sense in the chaos of her life. No matter how many times people tried to box her in, music always set her free. "Latasha, table 5 needs refills." Carla, one of the other waitresses, called from the front. "Got it," Latasha replied, trying to sound casual, but her heart was already racing. She glanced at the clock. It was getting late. Bradley was still sitting at his table, sipping wine and talking loudly, his voice cutting through the noise of the restaurant like a sharp knife. She took a deep breath and walked back to the dining area. As she approached Bradley's table, he looked up and smirked. "So, are you going to play?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Latasha nodded, but it wasn't for him. It was for herself. "Yeah, I'll play." "Well, I hope you're better than you look." He chuckled like it was a joke, but she could see the challenge in his eyes. He didn't expect her to succeed. He wanted to see her fail. Without saying anything else, Latasha made her way to the piano. The keys glowed under the dim restaurant lights, and for a moment, everything else faded away. The hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the noise of the kitchen. It all blurred out. All she could hear was her breath, steady and calm. Her fingers hovered over the keys for a second. She knew the song she would play, a soft jazz tune that always made her feel like she was floating. Her mother used to play it when she was a little girl, and it had been a while since she touched the piano. But now, in this moment, it felt right. The music was the only thing she could trust. She began to play. Slowly at first, the melody creeping out, like a secret shared between her and the piano. The sound was gentle but full of life. As her fingers moved across the keys, the room seemed to hold its breath. She didn't know if Bradley was still watching, but it didn't matter anymore. This was her time, and no one was going to take it away from her. The first few notes floated out of the piano, soft and slow. Latasha's fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, the rhythm of the music flowing through her like a current. For a moment, she forgot about the mocking tone Bradley had used, or the way his friends were looking at her like she was some sort of joke. All that mattered was the music, the sound she could create, the story she could tell through each note. The jazz piece she played was one her mother loved. It was full of heart and soul, and every time Latasha played it, it felt like she was connecting with something bigger than herself. Her fingers danced over the keys, finding the familiar patterns, the highs and lows, the crescendos and soft pauses. The music wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about expressing a side of her that she didn't often show. And in that moment, it was like the whole restaurant stopped moving, held in place by the music. As the melody swirled in the air, she glanced up briefly, catching a glimpse of Bradley at his table. His eyes were no longer filled with arrogance. For the first time, he was silent, his expression unreadable. Latasha focused on the piano again, her fingers finding the flow of the song, letting the music take over. She could feel the power of each note, building something stronger than any words could ever do. The rest of the restaurant seemed to melt away. The sound of the piano filled every corner of the room, every space between the tables. People stopped talking, and some even leaned forward in their chairs, listening. She knew they were all waiting for her to mess up, to make a mistake, to confirm the assumptions they had about her. But there was no room for doubt. Not right now. Latasha kept playing, her hands moving more confidently now, the tempo picking up. The song grew bolder, more daring, and with each passing second, she felt the tension in the air shift. The people at the table nearest to her exchanged glances, impressed by the richness of the music. Bradley's eyes, once filled with superiority, now looked almost confused. Maybe he didn't expect her to actually be good. Maybe he thought she'd play something clumsy, something that would make them all laugh. But as the last note of the song lingered in the air, the entire room seemed to take a collective breath. Silence filled the space, the kind that only happens after something remarkable. Latasha's hands hovered over the keys for a brief moment, not sure what she was expecting. Applause, a snide comment, or maybe nothing at all. But then it came. A slow clap from the far corner of the room. A few people joined in, and before she knew it, the entire restaurant was applauding. Latasha smiled to herself, a quiet, confident smile. She stood up, hands still shaking just a little, and walked away from the piano without looking back at Bradley. He didn't matter anymore. The music had spoken for her. Latasha made her way back to the kitchen, her heart still racing a little from the performance. The applause still echoed in her ears, but she didn't want to get too caught up in it. The last thing she wanted was for Bradley or anyone else to think she was looking for attention. She wasn't. She played for herself, for the part of her that no one ever bothered to see. As she passed by the tables, she caught a few whispers. A couple of regulars waved her over to compliment her, but she just nodded politely and kept walking. It was hard to ignore the knot of pride in her chest, but she knew better than to let it show. In a place like this, people were quick to judge, and she wasn't about to let her guard down. When she stepped into the kitchen, Carla raised an eyebrow at her. "That was some performance out there," she said with a grin. Latasha shrugged, trying to act casual. just played a song. A song. Carla laughed. Girl, you made that piano sing. You could have heard a pin drop in the room after you finished. Latasha smiled, but her mind was still on Bradley. She had seen him sitting there, staring at her with that strange look in his eyes. It wasn't smug anymore, not like before. Now it was something different, something closer to uncertainty. She didn't want to think about him, but she couldn't help it. She tried to shake off the feeling, focusing on her next tasks. She had to clear a couple of tables, make sure everyone was taken care of, and keep moving. It was the routine she knew so well, the one that kept her grounded. But as the evening went on, she couldn't stop noticing Bradley. He didn't leave right away like most people did after their meal. He lingered, chatting with his friends, but his attention was still on her. At one point, she caught him looking at her across the room, and when their eyes met, he quickly looked away. She tried not to care. He was just another customer, just another rich guy who thought he knew everything. But there was something about the way he watched her that made her feel seen. Not in the way people usually saw her, just another waitress, but in a way that felt more real, more personal. It wasn't until later, when she was clearing Bradley's table, that things took another turn. She placed the check down in front of him, trying to keep her expression neutral. But as she did, he stopped her with a hand on the edge of the table. Latasha, he said, his voice lower than before. That was impressive. She raised an eyebrow, not sure what he meant. Thanks. He hesitated for a second, his eyes shifting a little. I didn't think you had it in you, he admitted, almost quietly. She met his gaze, surprised. This wasn't the arrogant Bradley she had seen earlier. This was different, honest, maybe even a little humbled. She nodded once, trying to keep the upper hand. People don't always see what's underneath, she said, her voice steady. Without another word, she turned and walked away. The air around her felt different now, lighter. She had proven something, not just to him, but to herself. And for the first time in a long time, Latasha felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The rest of the night went by quietly, but Latasha couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. Bradley's words lingered in her mind. I didn't think you had it in you. She tried not to think too much about it. He was just another rich guy, probably bored and looking for something to entertain himself. But still, there was something in the way he had said it that made her wonder if he truly saw her, not just the waitress behind the counter, but the person who had a talent, a story, a life of her own. By the time her shift ended, the restaurant had started to empty out. The air felt less tense, less full of the usual judgment from the high-end crowd. Latasha gathered her things in the back, ready to head home and get some rest before her next shift. But as she walked toward the door, she noticed Bradley again. He was standing by the front, waiting for his friends to catch up. He looked up as she passed, and this time, there was no smirk, no challenge in his eyes. Just a quiet nod. Latasha wasn't sure what to make of it, but she nodded back, not feeling the need to say anything. As she walked out of the restaurant and into the cool night air, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend, Nikki. Hey girl, I heard about the piano thing tonight. You were amazing. Everyone's talking about it. You've got to keep playing. You've got the gift. Latasha smiled at the message, but it didn't fully sink in. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't doing this to prove something to others. The piano had always been her escape, her safe space. The moment she had shared with it that night, however small, was a reminder of why she'd kept going, even when everything around her was falling apart. She walked home, the streets quiet, and still, her mind buzzing with thoughts. But then, something unexpected happened. As she turned the corner, she saw Bradley again. This time, he was walking toward her, alone. She wasn't sure why he was out here so late, but she couldn't deny the curiosity that crept up inside her. Latasha, he called, and she stopped in her tracks, unsure of what to expect. He looked a little out of place now, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more like an ordinary guy than the wealthy figure he had seen earlier. I just wanted to say. He hesitated for a second, like the words weren't easy for him. You were right. You have something. Not just the piano, but the way you carry yourself. I don't know. It's different. Latasha raised an eyebrow, surprised by his honesty. Thanks, I guess. He smiled, a small, genuine smile, like he meant it. I didn't mean to be rude earlier. I wasn't trying to make fun of you. I just didn't expect you to blow me away like that. Latasha looked at him for a moment, taking it all in. This wasn't the Bradley she had met at the restaurant, the one who mocked her. This was a different side of him, a side that wasn't afraid to admit he was wrong. It's okay, she said. People make assumptions all the time. Doesn't mean they're right. He nodded, then hesitated before adding, I've got a piano at home. If you ever want to play again, you're welcome to come by. Latasha considered it for a second. It wasn't just about the invitation. It was about the change in him, the shift that had happened since that moment at the restaurant. And maybe, just maybe, it was a chance for her to take another step towards something more. Thanks, she said, her voice soft. I'll think about it. And with that, she turned and continued on her way home, the night air cool against her skin. For the first time in a long time, things felt a little bit different. The next morning, Latasha woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight spilled through her small apartment window, and for once, it didn't feel like a burden to get out of bed. Her fingers still tingled from the piano keys, and her heart was a little lighter. She made some tea and sat by the window, thinking about what Bradley had said the night before. His words had surprised her, not just because he admitted he was wrong, but because he actually seemed sincere. People like him didn't usually take the time to understand someone like her. She was just a waitress to most of them. Someone who brought food, cleaned up, and stayed quiet. But last night, when she played, something had shifted. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Nikki calling. Girl, I heard the whole thing. Nikki said before Latasha could even say hello. You seriously played in front of that crowd. And Bradley Richboy was speechless. I wish I was there. Latasha laughed. It just kind of happened. He dared me to play, so I did. And now he's inviting you to his place to play more. Nikki teased. You know that man's never had someone shut him up like that before. Latasha smiled but didn't say anything. She wasn't sure how she felt about the invitation yet. It wasn't just about the piano. There was something deeper there, something unfamiliar. She didn't know Bradley beyond that restaurant table, and part of her didn't want to get too close. But another part was curious. By the afternoon, she was back at the restaurant for her shift. Things were slower than usual, and everyone seemed to still be buzzing from the night before. A few regulars nodded at her with new respect, and one older couple even asked if she'd play again sometime. We didn't know you had that in you, the woman said kindly. Latasha just smiled and thanked her. She didn't need everyone to understand her story. Just knowing they saw her a little differently now was enough. Around 6, just before the dinner rush, a delivery guy walked in holding a large white box with a red bow. Delivery for Latasha, he said. Confused, she took the box and opened it in the kitchen. Inside was a beautiful sheet music notebook with her name printed in gold letters on the cover. A small card was tucked inside. You said people don't always see what's underneath. I'd like to see more. Hope you'll play again soon. Bradley. She stared at the note for a long moment. It wasn't flashy or over the top. Just simple, thoughtful. Carla peeked over her shoulder and raised an eyebrow. Who's trying to be all sweet now? Latasha chuckled. Someone who's full of surprises. She tucked the notebook into her bag and went back to work, still unsure about where this was all heading. But for the first time in a long time, she was open to finding out. 2 days later, Latasha stood outside a large townhouse in a quiet part of the city. She stared at the front door for a moment, still not sure if she should knock. The sheet music notebook Bradley had sent was tucked under her arm, and her heart was beating faster than she liked. She had told herself she was just going to play, nothing more. She wasn't here to impress him or let him into her world. But deep down, she knew this was more than just about music. Before she could change her mind, the door opened. "Hey," Bradley said, stepping aside to let her in. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't," Latasha said honestly. He nodded, not offended. "I get it. Come on in." The house was modern and quiet, with soft lights and shelves full of books and art. But what caught her eye was the piano in the living room. It was beautiful, sleek, black, and clearly taken care of. The moment she saw it, something in her relaxed a little. "You can sit wherever," Bradley said, walking over to the piano. "Do you want anything? Coffee? Tea?" "I'm good," she replied, placing her notebook down. She took a seat at the piano bench and ran her fingers lightly across the keys. It had been a long time since she played on a real piano like this, so smooth, so responsive. It made her want to lose herself in the music again. "You can play whatever you want," Bradley said, sitting on the couch nearby. "No pressure." Latasha gave a small nod, then opened her notebook. She picked a piece she hadn't played in years, something soft and soulful. As she started, her nerves faded away. It was just her and the music again. The melody filled the room slowly, warm and deep. Bradley didn't say a word. He just listened, eyes focused, no smug smile, no fake charm, just quiet attention. When she finished the piece, she looked up, expecting maybe a simple "that was nice." But instead, he looked genuinely moved. "That was beautiful," he said. "You play like you've lived every note." Latasha smiled, a little shy now. "That's kind of the point." There was a silence, not awkward, just thoughtful. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Why don't you do this full-time? I mean, you're clearly meant to be doing something more than waiting tables." Latasha leaned back a little. Life doesn't always make it that easy. There were bills, family stuff, things I had to handle. Music didn't pay the rent. "But it still lives in you," he said quietly. She didn't know how to respond to that. Not right away, because it was true. She had buried that part of herself for so long, but it had never really gone away. "I don't know what comes next," she said after a while. "But playing again, it feels good." Bradley smiled. "Then maybe this is a start." Latasha didn't say anything more. She just looked down at the piano again, feeling like something new had opened, something she hadn't expected, but maybe needed all along. A week later, Latasha found herself back at the restaurant, but this time, everything felt different. People smiled at her more. A few even asked if she'd be playing again soon. She was still doing her usual shifts, taking orders, cleaning tables, carrying trays. But there was a new kind of energy around her, like people had finally started to see something more in her than just a server. The piano in the corner had been polished. The manager had even mentioned that maybe, once a week, she could do a short set during the evenings. It wasn't anything official, but it was a start. Latasha didn't say yes right away, but she was thinking about it. After her shift, she walked outside and found Bradley leaning against his car across the street. He waved when he saw her. "You stalking me now?" she joked as she walked over. He laughed. "Just in the neighborhood. Thought I'd say hi." They stood there for a moment, neither of them rushing to speak. The night air was cool, the street quiet except for the sound of distant traffic. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what you said. About how life doesn't always make things easy." Latasha raised an eyebrow. And maybe I've had it a little too easy," he admitted. "Never really had to fight for anything. But watching you, hearing you play, it kind of made me realize how much I've taken for granted." She didn't know what to say to that. It wasn't the kind of thing she expected from someone like Bradley. But maybe that was the point. People weren't always what they seemed. "You helped me remember something," she said, "that I still have something to give. I just forgot how much it mattered." He nodded slowly. "So what now?" Latasha looked out at the street, her voice calm. Now I keep playing. I don't know where it's going to lead, but I'm not going to bury that part of myself again. Bradley smiled. Good. Because the world needs to hear you. They stood there a little longer, comfortable in the silence. So, he said with a small grin, does this mean you'll let me take you to that open mic night I told you about? She laughed softly, one step at a time. Bradley. He held up his hands in surrender. Fair enough. As they walked down the street together, side by side, Latasha felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not because of Bradley, not because of the compliments or the attention, but because she had found her voice again. And this time, she wasn't going to let it go quiet. She looked up at the night sky, a small smile on her lips. No one knew what tomorrow would bring. But tonight, she had music in her heart and strength in her step. And that was more than enough.